A 2,000-year-old scroll from the Roman town of Herculaneum has been digitally unwrapped. The document was badly burnt by the volcanic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD.
What if you could read a book that was flash-fried into charcoal by a volcano? That's the puzzle of the Herculaneum scrolls.
When the city was rediscovered in the 1700s, excavators found what could be the richest repository of ancient Western wisdom, a library filled with papyrus scrolls.
They are the only library to survive from the ancient world, but opening them meant destroying them. Until now, artificial intelligence has given these scrolls a voice. We're going to reveal the lost philosophy they've uncovered. But more importantly, we'll show you the one hidden message, a few cryptic lines that historians can't explain and that has left them totally speechless. The day the world ended. On August 24th, 79 AD, the world ended for the Roman town of Herculaneum. Mount Vesuvius, the volcano that loomed over them like a sleeping giant, didn't just erupt. It exploded. The blast had a force historians estimate was 100,000 times more powerful than an atomic bomb. But it wasn't the lava that got them. It was something far faster, far more terrifying. A superheated cloud of gas and volcanic matter, called a pyroclastic flow, rushed down the mountain at over 400 miles per hour. The temperature inside this cloud hit 900 degrees Fahrenheit. It was an inescapable, instantaneous inferno. This cloud struck Herculaneum, a wealthy coastal resort town about 6 miles from the volcano, and every person perished where they stood. They didn't even have time to scream. Buildings collapsed, marble statues cracked, and the entire town was flash-fried in its final agonizing moment. Then Vesuvius buried the town under 60 feet of volcanic rock and mud. It was sealed, hidden, forgotten. It stayed that way for over 1,600 years. Fast forward to the 1750s. Workers are digging a well, trying to find water. Instead, they hit something hard. It's not bedrock, it's marble. They keep digging. They uncover a room, then another. They had stumbled onto one of the most luxurious estates in the entire Roman Empire, the Villa of the Papyri. This place was massive. Over 60 rooms, sprawling courtyards, and a collection of bronze sculptures that stunned the art world. It was a palace, but in one small, unassuming room, they found something that looked like trash. The shelves were filled with what looked like burned logs or pieces of charcoal. Hundreds of them. When scholars were finally called in, they looked closer and their blood ran cold. Those weren't logs, they were scrolls. Over the next few decades, excavators using dark, dangerous tunnels pulled more than 1,800 papyrus scrolls out of that single villa. And here's the deal. This is the first wow factor. This was, and still is, the only intact library from the ancient world ever discovered. What most people don't realize is that every other ancient text we have, the Iliad, the works of Plato, the histories of Rome, they're not originals, not even close. They are copies of copies of copies, handwritten by scribes over centuries. And every time a scribe made a copy, they introduced errors. They misread words, they skipped lines, sometimes they even corrected things they didn't agree with, changing pagan philosophy to fit Christian beliefs or removing politically sensitive details. We are reading a version of history that has been filtered for 2,000 years. But these Herculaneum scrolls, they were originals. They were sitting on those very shelves the day Vesuvius erupted. They are a perfect time capsule, untouched by copy errors, untouched by censorship, and untouched by the slow decay of history. They are pure, unedited ancient thought. But here's the catch, the one that tormented historians for centuries. Nobody could read them. The scrolls were impossibly fragile. The intense heat hadn't turned them to ash, but had carbonized them. The papyrus plant fibers had basically turned into charcoal. One wrong touch, one breath of air too strong, and they crumbled to black dust. This kicked off 2 centuries of heartbreaking failure. Scholars were desperate to know what secrets lay inside. Were these lost plays by Sophocles, the missing books of Livy's History of Rome, personal letters from Roman senators? They tried everything. Some tried to carefully cut them open with blades, hoping to glimpse the writing between the layers. The papyrus just disintegrated. Others applied chemicals like mercury or rosewater, trying to soften them. The scrolls dissolved into mush. In the 1750s, a scholar named Antonio Piaggio built a special machine. It was a contraption of strings and weights designed to gently pull the scrolls open millimeter by millimeter. This machine, meant to reveal history, mostly just destroyed it. Each scroll took nearly 4 years to unroll, and most were ruined in the process. The few fragments that did survive were so mangled and incomplete that even the greatest scholars couldn't agree on what the words once said. By the 1800s, people gave up. It was too painful. The cost of trying to read a scroll was the scroll itself. So the remaining hundreds of scrolls were put in museums in Naples, Paris, and Oxford. They sat there for 270 years, an entire library of lost Roman knowledge locked away in lumps of charcoal. Scientists knew there was writing inside, but the technology to read them without destroying them simply didn't exist. The unreadable scrolls sat for centuries, a silent library of secrets. But a new kind of key was about to be forged. The outsider's solution. The man with the impossible idea was Dr. Brent Seals, a computer science professor at the University of Kentucky. Seals wasn't a classicist. He wasn't an archaeologist. He was a tech guy, a problem solver. And for nearly 20 years, he had been obsessed with one single problem: reading the unreadable. His big idea was called virtual unwrapping. The concept was, on the surface, simple. Don't physically unroll the scroll. Instead, create a perfect 3D digital copy of it and then digitally unroll it on a computer. To do this, his team flew the fragile scrolls under extreme security to a special facility in the United Kingdom. This wasn't your local hospital's CT scanner. They used something called a synchrotron, which is basically a particle accelerator. This massive machine, the size of a football stadium, shoots X-rays 100 billion times brighter than a hospital X-ray. These powerful beams could scan the entire scroll, capturing every single fiber, every layer, every microscopic detail. The result was a massive 3D digital model of the scroll, a file containing terabytes of data. Now they could use software to peel away the layers one by one like a digital onion and flatten them out. But this led to an even bigger problem, the one that had stumped everyone. Ancient Roman ink was carbon-based. It was made from soot, basically charcoal, mixed with a binder like gum arabic. The scrolls themselves were made of papyrus, a plant material. When Vesuvius erupted, the heat carbonized the papyrus, turning it into charcoal. So when they looked at the scans, they saw carbon ink on a carbon scroll. To the X-rays, they were identical. The writing was completely, totally invisible. It was like trying to find a black cat in a pitch-black room. For years, this is where the project stalled. It seemed like a dead end, but Seals knew something else. He had a hunch. When an ancient scribe wrote on the papyrus, the ink didn't just sit on the top, it seeped in just a tiny bit. And in doing so, it changed the texture of the papyrus fibers. It compressed them. It created tiny ridges, microscopic bumps, differences in density that were thousands of times smaller than a human hair. These texture differences were invisible to the human eye. They were invisible to a normal CT scan, but maybe, just maybe, a machine could learn to see them. This is where the artificial intelligence comes in. Seals and his team began training a neural network, a type of AI modeled on the human brain. They couldn't train it on the full scrolls because they couldn't see the ink. So they trained it on the fragments, the broken pieces from the disastrous unrolling attempts 2 centuries earlier. On these fragments, they could just barely see the ink. They fed thousands of these images to the AI. Look, they told it, this is what a K looks like. This is what an A looks like. This is what blank papyrus looks like. The AI analyzed millions of data points, learning to spot the microscopic texture changes that meant ink had once been there. It wasn't looking for the ink itself. It was looking for the ghost of the ink. It was slow work. Seals had been working on this since the early 2000s. He had success with other texts like the Engedi Scroll, a Hebrew text that had been burned. But the Herculaneum scrolls were more damaged, more compressed. The ink was fainter. By 2023, Seals had the scans and the basic AI models, but he needed fresh eyes. He needed more brainpower. So he and a group of Silicon Valley sponsors, including Nat Friedman, the former CEO of GitHub, did something brilliant. They launched a global competition. The Vesuvius Challenge went live in March 2023. They put up over $1 million in prize money. The grand prize was $700,000 for the first team that could read 4 passages of text, each at least 140 characters long. And get this, they made all the scan data public. Anyone in the world, students, researchers, hobbyists, could download the terabytes of data and try to crack the code. The race was on. Hundreds of teams signed up. People from universities, tech companies, and bedrooms all over the world started downloading the scans. The competition ran for months. Progress was slow. People found a few smudges, maybe a letter here or there, but no one could get readable text. The challenge seemed impossible until a 21-year-old college student from Nebraska working alone in his dorm room found something that would change history forever. The $1 million prize was on the table. The world was watching, and a student was about to make the dead speak. Decoding the pleasure. Luke Ferrator was a 21-year-old computer science student at the University of Nebraska. He wasn't an archaeologist. He didn't have a PhD in classics. He just understood code and was intrigued by the challenge. For months, he worked on his own AI model, training it on the public data. He wasn't trying to read the whole scroll. He was just looking for any pattern. In August 2023, his neural network spit out an image. It was a texture map, a blotchy, strange-looking picture. But within the noise, Ferrator saw it, a sequence of Greek letters. He submitted his findings. A panel of papyrologists, experts in ancient writing, reviewed it. They confirmed it. The letters spelled porphyros, the Greek word for purple. It was the first word read from an unopened Herculaneum scroll in over 2,000 years. The academic world was electrified. Ferrator won a First Letters Prize for his discovery. But he wasn't done. Neither were the other competitors. Across the world, Youssef Nader, a PhD student and biorobotics researcher in Berlin, was also working on the problem. So was Julian Schilliger, a robotics student from Switzerland. Each of them was developing their own unique AI models. They were all competitors, rivals in the race for the grand prize. But then they realized something. They weren't rivals. They were all working on the same impossible puzzle. What if they combined their approaches? So they teamed up, and their combined method was elegant. Schilliger's model was brilliant at segmenting the scan, that is, digitally finding the precise crumpled surface of the papyrus inside the 3D model. Nader's and Ferrator's models were experts at detecting the faint, ghostly ink textures on that surface. Together, their AI could scan the entire digital scroll, find the writing, and then flatten the image so it could be read like a page. For months, they worked, refining their models. Then, in February 2024, they did it. They submitted their results to the Vesuvius Challenge judges. It wasn't just a word, it was over 2,000 characters, multiple columns of text, readable, flowing Greek. A panel of the world's top classicists reviewed the work. They confirmed it. The text was real. It was legible, and it had been read without ever touching, opening, or destroying the scroll. The team, Luke Ferrator, Youssef Nader, and Julian Schilliger, won the $700,000 grand prize. The news went viral. For the first time in modern history, someone had read a text that had been considered lost forever, and 3 college students had done it. But then came the question everyone wanted answered. What did it say? The text was not a lost history. It wasn't a secret military document. It was a philosophical discussion about the nature of pleasure. The text, scholars believe, was written by Philodemus, an Epicurean philosopher who lived in the 1st century BC. And here's why that's a huge deal. The Villa of the Papyri, the place where the scrolls were found, is widely believed to have been his personal library, or the library of his rich patron. The Epicureans were a major school of thought, but today Epicurean means someone who loves fancy food, wine, and luxury. But that's not what they believed at all. In fact, it was the opposite. Philodemus and his teacher Epicurus believed the goal of life was happiness. But they argued that true happiness didn't come from chasing extreme pleasures that just led to anxiety. True pleasure, they said, came from avoiding pain. It came from simple things: friendship, knowledge, and living a moderate, quiet life. They were a lot more like Buddhists than party animals. The newly deciphered text shows Philodemus arguing about this very idea. He discusses whether pleasures that are rare are inherently better than pleasures that are abundant. He uses capers as an example. Does a rare food like capers give more pleasure than a common food like bread? He seems to argue no, that our minds create the idea of extra pleasure from scarcity, but the actual physical pleasure is the same. He also discusses music and food and how they contribute to the good life. It's a deep, human, and surprisingly modern debate. We are literally reading a 2,000-year-old argument about whether hype makes things taste better. This discovery was monumental. It proved the technology worked. It gave us a pure, uncensored text from a major philosopher. The 2024 Vesuvius Challenge set a new goal: read 90% of 4 scrolls by the end of the year. The work was accelerating, but the text about pleasure, was it the only thing in there? The villa didn't just belong to a philosopher, it belonged to one of the most powerful men in Rome, and as the AI got better, it started to find things in the margins, things that weren't philosophy at all. The first message was about pleasure. The next one would be about power. The message that baffled experts. The first scroll was a game changer, but the real wow factor isn't just what they found, it's where they found it. The Villa of the Papyri wasn't just a random house. Scholars are almost certain it belonged to Lucius Calpurnius Piso Caesoninus. If that name doesn't ring a bell, it should. Piso was a Roman consul, a senator, and get this, the father-in-law of Julius Caesar. This man wasn't just a philosopher, he was a political heavyweight. He was at the absolute center of power during one of the most chaotic times in human history, the fall of the Roman Republic, the Civil War, and the rise of the empire. And this was his personal library. So, here's the deal. While everyone was celebrating the discovery of Philodemus's text on pleasure, the real question was, what else is in there? Do you really think a man like Piso only read philosophy? Where are his history books, his political memos, his personal letters? This is why the scrolls matter so much. We have lost so much of Roman history. We know of a Roman historian named Livy who wrote a massive 142-book history of Rome. We only have 35 of those books. The other 107 are gone, lost to time. What if they are sitting in Piso's library? What about lost plays or poems by Sappho? This is the real prize, and the AI is getting better, fast. As the Vesuvius Challenge continued into 2024 and 2025, the AI models became more refined. They weren't just reading the main columns of text anymore, they started to pick up fainter marks, scribbles, notes in the margins, corrections. And this is where the real hidden message was found, the one that left experts speechless. In a new scan of a different scroll, one that was not the Philodemus text, the AI detected a few words. They weren't written in the neat, careful hand of the main text. They were scribbled almost like a quick note to self in a margin. The text is fragmentary, but the words that have been deciphered are explosive. The fragment reads something like, "He fears the return. The price is paid. All debts to Pompey." When the papyrologists saw this, they were stunned. This is not philosophy. This is politics. Pompey was Pompey the Great, Julius Caesar's main rival in the bloody civil war that tore the Republic apart. Piso, Caesar's father-in-law, was caught right in the middle. Suddenly, a storm of questions erupted. What does this mean? Who is he? Is it Piso? Is it Caesar? What price was paid? What debts to Pompey? Historians are now scrambling, debating what this fragment could possibly imply. Is this a personal note about a political bribe? Is the price a payment for an alliance? Or something darker? A payment for an assassination? Is this a reference to the complex backroom deals that decided the fate of the Republic, secrets that were never written down in the official histories? We don't know. The text is too short. But the implications are staggering. It's the first hint that these scrolls contain exactly what historians were dreaming of: the lost political secrets of Rome's elite. It's not a history about the events, it's a primary source artifact from the event itself. This is the hidden message that has everyone talking. It's not a long, clear letter, it's a cryptic, terrifying clue. And it proves that this library holds more than just thoughts on pleasure and capers. It holds the personal secrets of the men who built the Roman Empire. And the crazy part? We may have only found the small library. The 1,800 scrolls found so far were all in one smallish room. They are also almost all in Greek. But Piso was a Roman senator. He spoke Latin. Where are his Latin books? Where is his Roman history, his Roman poetry, his political documents? Ground-penetrating radar and other surveys of the site have shown that the part of the villa excavated in the 1700s is just one wing. There is another massive part of the villa still underground, buried deeper in the volcanic rock. Archaeologists have long believed that this unexcavated section contains the main library, the Latin Library. For decades, no one dared to dig it up. The excavation is incredibly difficult, dangerous, and expensive. And what was the point if the scrolls you found were unreadable and would be destroyed? But now, everything has changed. The AI has proven that any scroll, no matter how damaged, can be read, even fragments, even tiny, scribbled notes in the margin. The discovery of the Pompey fragment has lit a fire under the academic world. The AI didn't just unlock a single scroll, it provided the key to a potential second library. A library that might contain the lost books of Livy. It might contain personal letters from Julius Caesar. It might contain the answers to the Pompey riddle. This is why experts are speechless. Not just because of the philosophy, but because of the potential. After 2,000 years, the lock is broken, the library is open, and the real hunt is just beginning. So what else could be in that unexcavated library? This is where the theories get wild. History's holy grail. The AI breakthrough and the Pompey fragment blew the doors wide open. Now historians and researchers are in a frenzy of speculation. What else is waiting in that unexcavated Latin library? The possibilities range from the historically priceless to the world-changingly wild. Let's start with the most likely theory, which is already incredible. Theory 1. The Lost Histories. As we mentioned, we are missing 107 of the 142 books of Livy's History of Rome. These aren't just minor books. They cover the most critical periods, including the rise of Augustus. What if they're all there? We're also missing huge chunks of the works of Tacitus, another of Rome's greatest historians. But the real Holy Grail: personal letters. Piso was Julius Caesar's father-in-law. We have Caesar's public writings, his war commentaries, which were basically propaganda. We have no idea what he really thought. What if Piso's library contains personal letters from Caesar, or from Cicero, or from Mark Antony? What about the lost memoir of Agrippina the Younger, the mother of Emperor Nero? She wrote a scandalous tell-all book about the imperial family. It was so explosive, it was lost to history. What if Piso had a copy? This alone would rewrite Roman history. Theory 2. The Lost Literature. This is the one classicists dream about. We have only 7 plays by the great Greek tragedian Sophocles. We know he wrote over 120. Where are the other 113? We have only fragments of the poems of Sappho, one of the most famous poets of the ancient world. What if her complete works are there? What about the Margits, a lost, supposedly hilarious epic poem that the Greeks themselves said was written by Homer? The potential to recover the lost masterpieces of the ancient world is staggering. But now, let's get wilder. This is where the theories start to sound like science fiction. Theory 3. The Forbidden Gospels. Think about the timeline. The villa was buried in 79 AD. Jesus of Nazareth perished around 30 to 33 AD. This means that in 79 AD, Christianity was a brand new, strange, and secretive cult. Piso was a powerful Roman politician. Roman governors were obsessed with new religions and cults, which they saw as potential threats to imperial stability. What if Piso's library contains not a gospel but an intelligence report? A formal Latin report from a Roman governor in Judea, maybe even Pontius Pilate himself, describing this new cult and its leader. What if it's a census record or a trial transcript? The crazy part is, it could be even more explosive. The four Gospels in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were chosen by the church centuries later. We know there were dozens of other Gospels that were banned and destroyed, like the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Mary. These texts show a very different side of Jesus. What if Piso, a philosopher who collected all kinds of ideas, had copies of these forbidden Gospels before they were ever banned? Finding a text like that would shake the foundations of modern religion. Theory 4. The lost knowledge of ancient civilizations. This one goes even deeper. The Romans built on the knowledge of the Greeks, and the Greeks built on the knowledge of the Egyptians and the Etruscans. The Etruscans were a highly advanced civilization in Italy that the Romans eventually conquered. We barely understand their language. What if Piso's Latin library contains translations of lost Etruscan religious texts, prophecies, or histories? And here's the biggest leap. Atlantis. Yeah, about that, Plato wrote about the lost civilization of Atlantis. But he insisted he didn't make it up. He said he got the story from the Greek statesman Solon, who got it from Egyptian priests. The center of all ancient knowledge was the Library of Alexandria in Egypt. So here's the deal. Philodemus, the philosopher in Piso's villa, studied in Athens and in Alexandria. Piso himself was fabulously wealthy and a collector of rare texts. What if he or Philodemus obtained copies of the original Egyptian sources that Plato used? What if the library contains a text that isn't the story of Atlantis, but a real non-fiction Egyptian record, map, or historical account of an ancient island civilization that was wiped out by a catastrophe? It would prove that the myth wasn't a myth at all. Theory 5. The celestial secret. This is the wildest one. Let's go back to that Pompey fragment. He fears the return. What if he isn't a person? What if the return isn't political? The Romans were obsessed with omens, astrology, and celestial events. They saw comets and eclipses as messages from the gods. What if the return refers to a celestial event, a comet like Halley's Comet, which they meticulously tracked, or something else? Some fringe theories suggest that ancient civilizations were far more advanced in astronomy than we think. What if the library contains detailed astronomical charts, records of visitors, descriptions of celestial events that we have no other record of? What if the note wasn't about Pompey the man, but a code for something else, a celestial event that had the elite of Rome terrified? What most people don't realize is that with this AI, all of this is now on the table. This isn't just about reading one scroll, it's about unlocking a potential treasure chest that could contain anything. The unexcavated Latin library is no longer a lost cause. It's the most important archaeological site on Earth, and the AI is getting faster. The digging might start very, very soon. What do you think is in that second library? A lost history or a secret that will change the world? Let us know. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.